mean, I want to share the story, and Ricki has, wants to share too about how this came to be. And I'm Ricki, like, why don't you just start it off? Let's tell everybody how this started.
Uh, well, I know, we were talking about work, and since I had been doing a lot of research on podcasts, because I was trying to find some for you to get on for your other business, and we got to discussing podcasts, and I said, I'm about to just start my own. And it's sort of
Well,
like,
you said they were so boring, like that they were just so dry. And
yeah,
how do they have like
I
38,000
know.
followers when
I
it's
was
like,
blown away.
and I know, and there's a reason I gave you the task of going through all the podcasts to find
Yep.
which ones might be suitable, because it's painful.
I think I probably went through 500 podcasts to get to a usable list of like 47. And, we were having this conversation, and I was just sort of like, this is, like, I'm about to do my own. And that's when you were like, oh my gosh, like, I would love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll jump in here because I have been thinking for a long time about doing a podcast. I've had several ideas. I know exactly the kind of podcast I wanted, but I didn't want to do it alone. And I didn't want to just have guests and things like that. I wanted an actual co-host and somebody that, but Ricki and I were cousins and we did grow up together, but you know how cousins sort of drift apart, right? You go have your own lives and you go have your own family. And it was actually another cousin of ours who kept saying to me, you got to talk to Ricki about a podcast. Ricki and you would be great on a podcast. And I'm like, like maybe, but I don't know Ricki that well
Yeah.
anymore, right? Like we hadn't sort of reconnected. And then when we started kind of working together a little bit on something else, that's when I started, like, I was sussing you out to
Yeah.
see, is this gonna um, and that's when this came up, and you're like going on a whole rant about how
Yeah.
horrible all these podcasts are. And in
Yeah.
the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, maybe this is right. Maybe this
Yeah.
is right. And then you actually had an idea, like you had
Yes.
already sort of thought through and
Yeah. Well, and it's something I too have sat on for years. I had actually um proposed it to a friend of mine because I thought that would be great. Um but I I'm not gonna lie, it kind of started with a different sort of concept, with being in Granny's kitchen. And because growing up for me, I felt like that was the place where all the ladies would get together. And, you would go to Granny's house, and, you would listen to them gossip or share advice or whatever. It was like the place where you would go and get the
complain
tea.
about the men.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was always a welcoming environment, right? And,
Yeah.
so that was sort of what I threw at you. And
Mm-hmm.
it grew
Well,
into like,
yeah, sorry. I
no,
just
just
want to
it
say
grew
that
into like, I shared that, and then you threw some really great ideas back, and it just sort of snowballed.
well, I think because your initial idea was to call it Grandma's Kitchen, or
Yes.
the word grandma, and I'm like, we don't have grandmas.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, we do, but like our grannies
Yeah.
were, and probably like we shared with people that were cousins, but just for a little context, Ricki's technically my second
Yeah.
cousin, so my granny is her granny's mom.
Yeah.
So we'll get all these pieces together. So when we
Right.
say grannies plural, we do mean two people.
Yeah.
But if we say granny, we also generally mean the older granny,
Yeah.
Granny Rosella,
Yeah.
because because my kids also called her granny Granny,
Yeah.
right? Even though she would be their aunt. So
Yeah. Our
it's just the
our
way it kind of was.
family dynamic sort of seems a little strange, I think, to some people. But
Probably,
yeah.
but I bet you if you scratch the surface of their family
Oh,
dynamic,
I know.
might.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we went from Grandma's Kitchen, and
Mhm.
then the problem I had with the word kitchen was it made me feel like this would be like a cooking or
Hmm.
like traditional skills. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I knew I wanted a podcast where I can swear if I want to, where we can tell scary
Yeah.
stories, where we can tell the weird things and the and I mean, I'm very much in all my life around sort of personal growth, business growth, and those, like, I just wanted a place to where everything could be talked about. But we love this idea of like this cousin support, this like family support, and being able to, and it just reminded us, and I think it was my daughter who said Granny's basement,
Yeah.
like, what about Granny's basement? And it was like, that's it, because we would all sneak down into the basement, you'd have everybody bring their blankets, you'd have sleepovers, like it was just the place to go,
Yeah.
and that's where you told all the secrets. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of how it started,
Yeah.
based on Ricki's initial idea, and then we just snowballed from there.
Yeah. And we wanted it to be that place where we could share, anything under the sun, not just, specific things,
Yeah,
because that's how it
yeah,
was growing up. We'd get together and
yeah.
share those crazy stories and, you know,
Yeah, and then I think, was it you or somebody had the idea of calling it Granny's attic? Or
no,
somebody said that.
no,
And it was like we immediately both thought,
yeah,
we're not crafting.
no.
Like, Ricki
That's
knows how to
exact.
craft. I don't craft. So
I am a craftaholic. I,
good. So when people start, like, when we get so popular, people start sending us gifts, they
yeah,
can send you
perfect.
craft supplies.
Yeah.
They can send me like foodie items because I love food.
Well, I'm not going to say no to food either, but I
I
am
wouldn't either.
definitely, yeah, I am a serial crafter. Like I start so many things.